Welcome to the Blue Atlas Trade Show Marketing Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Trade Show Marketing Podcast. And today we're diving a little bit into maximizing ROI from trade shows and really kind of going through a little bit of an introduction of really what that means. I know so many of you guys are doing trade shows and have been doing them for years, but really understanding how you can get more value out of it, I think is important. And that's the kind of stuff we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the ROI in trade shows, strategically planning for trade shows, and then talk a little bit about the budget allocation and management of it. At the end of our podcast today, I'll give you a couple of action items to take away. So let's get started. First, let's talk about understanding ROI in trade shows. First of all, what does it really mean for ROI? You know, we do trade shows, we go, 52% of companies feel like that they get the best leads from a trade show, which is why obviously there are 13,000 shows in the United States and obviously hundreds of thousands of companies that are exhibiting at various trade shows across the country. So it's obviously felt like it's a good venue, but unfortunately, only 14% of companies feel like they actually get a positive ROI from trade shows. It's kind of weird if you only 14% of people feel like they're making good money from it. Why do we continue to do it? But it's a great venue to bring targeted prospects in front of you so that you can talk about your products and services. So obviously there is value in a trade show. We wouldn't still be doing it. Even after COVID, trade shows have rebounded pretty good, actually. Surprisingly, I didn't expect that to happen coming out of COVID, but there's been a great rebound in trade shows. And we've gone actually back to the way we used to do trade shows. I kind of felt like more digital would be involved in trade shows coming out of COVID. And I feel like for the most part, we've really gone back to the old way of doing things, which is good and bad, but really mostly good, which means people are still showing up. People are still coming by your booth. People are still exhibiting and so on. So the biggest question is, how do we make money from it? How do we make this a positive experience? And ultimately, that's what we're talking about with ROI. It's expensive to do a trade show, not just the cost of getting an exhibitor space, but then you have the design, the promo items, the flyers, all the giveaways, everything that you have for a trade show. Then you have to get your people there. They have to stay at the hotel, which is not usually pretty cheap because they always pick a really nice hotel for these trade shows. So overall, there's a massive budget that goes into one trade show. And in most companies are doing that 2, 3, 5, 10 times a year. There's a lot of money going into it. So how do we make sure that we are making money from it? To me, looking at the ROI of a trade show, there's really three things that we want to address. One is attendee engagement. If we're going to pay the money to have a booth and put this booth together, we need to get engagement. We need to have plenty of people coming to our booth. We need to get those business cards. We need to be generating leads. Because ultimately, why are we doing a trade show? There's a couple other things we'll talk about, but really the biggest thing is creating leads. That's why we're doing it. So in order to create leads, we've got to engage the attendees. The better engagement we have, the better ROI. So this is definitely one of the influencers for ROI. Next is lead conversion. You know, we can get thousands of business cards, but if they're not the right leads and we're not converting them, we still don't have a positive ROI. So how do we convert more leads? We've done lots of trade shows for clients. We've done lots of trade shows ourselves. And we all kind of have that tendency of, all right, we have our booth, we have our flyers, we might have some cool pins and giveaways. Let's go collect business cards. But is that the right lead? And ultimately, if that's all we're doing, we don't know if that's the right lead. Half the time, they're not going into a CRM. They're actually going to a stack of cards laying on somebody's desk and, a salesperson's desk, and they're going to follow up a couple of phone calls, a couple of emails, and go, okay, that was fine. I got a couple of leads from it. We can do better than that. And in order to get a positive ROI, we want to influence our lead conversion rate. Last is brand exposure. Now, there are a lot of companies that say, I know who my prospects are. I know who I need to market to. I just need to be in front of them. They need to be able to touch my products, understand my services, talk to our sales team, talk to our CEO. There's all kinds of reasons to do a trade show that are not specifically for leads. But even if it's about brand exposure, you're still trying to create leads to a certain degree in some type of form or fashion, or nurture the possibility of a lead. So your brand exposure and measuring that will be an influence of if you feel like you had a positive ROI. All right, let's get into our point number 2 today. Strategic planning for the trade shows. This is where it starts to develop positive ROI. A lot of people feel like positive ROI happens with, all right, we're at the show now let's make this thing worthwhile. it's too late. If you made it to the show and you have no plan, it's too late to make it positive ROI. You might get lucky, and I hope that you do, but you might get lucky with it. But if you don't have a good plan, or at some point in the past you've created a plan that you're continuing to work and utilize, and you know that it works for you. If you're getting to the show going, all right, hey guys, first day, our booth set up, what's our plan? You've lost. Don't do that. So let's plan ahead of time. First thing is, let's set some measurable goals. Thing is, how do you know if you had positive ROI or not? If you don't have anything measurable, if you don't have any goals for it and some specifics that you're gauging your ROI against, it could be positive, it could be not. You could say, well, the show was great because of brand exposure. How do you measure that? Well, we get leads. How many leads do you really get? Because you walk back with 100 business cards after your trade show, are they really good leads? And is that leading to positive business? You can collect business cards from anywhere. Are we getting business from it? So set measurable goals. 3 areas that I always kind of recommend, broad areas: lead generation goals, sales goals, and networking goals. So a lot of the trade shows provide venues for you to be able to actually do, lead calls, sales calls, and even close business at trade shows. Not all are set up that way. A lot of them are more lead generation, but there are some venues that you may be attending that you can close business right there on the spot. If that's a possibility, make sure you have all the tools you need to do that. And set a goal for it. What are we going to be able to do? I worked with an electronics distributor quite a few years ago, and they actually had meeting spaces set up. It's a very big show for distributors. So we had manufacturers, and we were there as a distributor that was exhibiting. And then we had our clients that they were trying to find all the things for the industry for home electronics. But they set up meeting spaces. So we could schedule meetings and use those spaces to sit down, and we actually closed business. I mean, we would write up orders, and that thing got sent back to the office while we're at a show. So we wanted to start setting goals of what we were going to sell right there at the trade show. Our biggest goals were more around lead generation, obviously brand exposure and brand awareness, so that people knew we were in business, doing business, going strong. But a lot of it was still the lead generation. So those 3 areas: set measurable goals, lead generation, sales, and networking. Networking is a goal, especially if you're doing trade shows. You're doing it because you're getting the face-to-face time. Otherwise, you could do it all online. You just sit behind a Zoom meeting and send out emails, and you would do it there. We do trade shows because of face-to-face. Now, because of that, you want to set some goals for your networking. So it's not just, well, let me go meet some people. Like, set a plan beforehand of where you're going, why you're going, who you're hoping to meet. And as we get into some future episodes, we'll dive a little bit more in the pre-show marketing and pre-show planning, which is going to talk about really narrowing down the attendee list to specifically who you're targeting. But for now, let's just talk about, you really need to be setting some goals in lead generation, sales, and networking. The next thing about strategic planning to get positive ROI is really selecting the right trade show. At the end of the day, you've got to make sure that you're going to the right place. I've talked to a lot of clients and said, well, we go to so-and-so trade show. Why? Because we always have. If we have no measurable goals and we don't really know if it's giving us positive ROI, sometimes that question might be, should we be going there? Now, we have one client that literally go to trade shows because that's where all their clients are. They have 90 to 95% of everyone attending it as a client. They're a very specific niche industry service offering. And so they'll go to a show. Most of those people are clients, but that's a business development. And they realize they have to go to those not because they're getting new business, but maintaining business. That's okay too. That might just literally be the goal. We know we're going to have to spend money to be in front of them, but we can be in front of 250 clients at one time and see them all and network with them all. That's still positive ROI. That's a lot. In 3 days, you can do what 250 clients, what it would take you months to do as a single salesperson sitting at a desk, calling and following up with your salespeople. So there's obviously different types of goals, but make sure that the shows that you're going to, one, provide an audience alignment. If you haven't planned prior to that to really know who you're targeting and don't have a target buyer persona, you may not be going to the right shows because you don't know if the attendees are right. The shows will tell you who the attendees are. You got to spend a little bit of time drilling down into that. Look who's talking about it, messaging about it. Search Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter. Search LinkedIn. See who's really saying, hey, we're going to be here. Who else is exhibiting? But make sure you have an audience alignment to get that strategy plan to make sure you're going to the right show. And then obviously the most obvious is make sure it's industry relevant. If it's not irrelevant to either your industry or the clients, that you're targeting, it may not be the right show. There are a lot of general shows. There's a lot of small business shows or say general marketing shows. There's a lot of things out there. Like I said earlier, there's 13,000 trade shows that happen in the US every year. It's a lot of trade shows. There are a lot that may not be a good fit for you. So to wrap up here, our second point of strategically planning for trade shows, make sure you're going to the right show. Make sure you're setting measurable goals. All right. Next thing before we get into our action items to take away today, budget allocation and management. You've got to set a budget. And most of our clients would say, well, what's your budget? Well, we don't really have one. One, they may not want to tell me the budget. I get that. But most of the time it's because they really don't have a budget. They really don't know what they're planning to spend on that. So then they don't know if there is positive ROI because you don't know how much you're spending. What's the investment? Well, we don't know. We send 4 or 5 people. They're all in hotel rooms. We buy food. We buy plane tickets. It just goes on and on because that's what they've always done. Back to that same thing of this is what we do. Make sure you're actually setting up a budget and then allocate that to the different areas so that you don't overspend. You want to set up your budget between things like your booth design, your marketing, and your logistics. There are some other categories, but really if you just plan those 3 big categories and allocate budget and stick within your budget, you'll cover most things for trade shows. So let's talk about booth design. Your booth design can range from a few $100s to 10s, 20s. I've seen really large booths that are 6 figures. Even some of the major shows that they even see 7-figure booths. But you've got to have a budget to know what you can and can't do. There's some really creative ways to get your booth designed on a very small budget, for say a couple of $1,000s, which when you do that booth design, it should carry from one show to the next. So it's an investment spread over at least this year's trade shows, maybe a couple years trade shows. But there's some really creative ways to get that booth designed inexpensively and still make you look very nice, polished, and professional. But make sure you've got a budget allocated for that so you don't spend too much. The marketing bucket really has a lot of things in it, from pre-show marketing, post-show marketing, and then everything you're going to need there at the show, like promo items, flyers, sponsorships of events, anything that you're going to have to spend money on in the marketing bucket. And then finally, logistics, and that's the real expense of getting people there, putting them up in hotels, the flights, everything that's involved in that, along with what it costs for them to attend the show. A lot of these shows will give you a booth and maybe give you one ticket in. Then you've got 3 other people going. Sometimes those tickets may run in several $1,000s. So you've got a lot that will go into logistics. And have an idea with that. When you've targeted the show, you should be able to get cost, and you can kind of understand what that budget, how it needs to be defined. Managing that budget is going to be another way really to influence your ROI and get it more to a positive place. There's a lot of cost-saving things that you can do to be really creative, to look very polished, like we're talking about with the booth, but you can do that in other things as well. There are ways to offer networking opportunities. We've worked with some clients that there may be a sponsorship of, say, a happy hour that the event is organizing, but it may literally be a $5,000 sponsorship. That's a lot of money in comparison to going to the hotel and saying, hey, do you have a meeting room that I could book for one night? Yeah. How many people are you going to have? Well, we're probably going to have, say, 50 to 100 people. I'd like to give them some hors d'oeuvres and drinks. And they go, hey, that'll be $1,500. We can take care of that. No problem. Okay. You just saved yourself a lot of money by being creative. There's creative ways with your giveaways. One thing that we like to do is to go with a very inexpensive giveaway for the promo grabbers, the ones that just walk by, grab your promo items. They grab a flyer if you're looking, but usually they're just grabbing the promo items, shove it in a bag, and keep walking. Let's give them the expensive things. When you do it right and you've done pre-show marketing and you know who you're targeting and are marketing to them before the show, the good promo items, which may only be a quantity of, say, 50, those are reserved for when somebody comes and sets a meeting with you. You have a really good conversation with them. Say, hey, let me get you something to take away. Here's a binder. Here's something that's really nice to take away that's logoed, and so that you can really take something away with our name on it. But you don't give that to everybody. So there's some really interesting creative ways that you can allocate these budgets and manage these budgets. But if you don't set one, you don't know if you're managing it properly. You don't know if you're contributing to a negative ROI with your trade show. You don't really know what you're targeting from a cost and a return that you need. So Let me wrap this up. So our 3 points today is understanding the ROI, really understanding that your key factors are attendee engagement, lead conversion, and your brand exposure. Make sure you're strategically planning for trade shows by setting those measurable goals, selecting the right trade show, and then you're managing your budget. You're allocating a budget, you know how much it is, and you're measuring it, managing it with good quality and impactful things that can also be cost saving and economical. So here's what I want you to do. Here are the action items for you to take away. Go and evaluate your past trade show performances to set realistic goals. How much have you spent? How many leads did you actually get? How many attendees are there? Start to put some numbers together so you know what those trade shows are doing for you. Basically get a baseline of where you're coming from. Number 2, go research the upcoming trade shows to make sure, one, the ones that we've been going to, are they the best fit? Research if there's some others that are a better fit. Once you start looking at where you've attended and exhibited, you're going to start to realize, hey, this show and these type of attendees do much better than these over here. Are there more shows like that? And there probably are. So start researching some upcoming trade shows to find the best fit for your company. And finally, create a checklist of those key ROI factors to monitor during the next trade show. Basically, it can be a spreadsheet, but kind of give yourself a dashboard. Here's our budget. Here's our attendee engagement we're trying to target. Here's the leads we're trying to create. Here's the brand exposure we're trying to do. List all of those things out so that you can set your target. And then in your follow-up for the next 30 days to 60 days after a trade show, make sure you're tracking what realistically happened so that you have an idea. Did you get positive ROI? So thanks for joining us today on Trade Show Marketing. Join us next time as we dive a little bit deeper into the booth itself and promotional materials at your trade show. Thanks. I'm Nate Stockard. Thanks for joining us.